Hey, welcome to this week's Well Nourished Kids podcast. Today, nutritionist and women's health coach Anna from Nourish Us is joining us. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to have this chat.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to chat to you again, Georgia. I feel like we could chat for hours.
No, I know it really is one of those situations. I was on Anna's own podcast, and what is your podcast called, actually?
The nourished mama.
Yeah, okay. And
Yeah.
just recently, and yeah, we just couldn't stop talking. So I thought that it was perfect. I think having her on today is a really great addition to some of the topics that we've already talked about on the podcast. And yeah, I'm really excited to chat. So before we get started, just tell us about yourself, your background, how you became a nutritionist.
Yeah, well, it's quite the story. I'll try and condense it. But basically, I actually came from the corporate world. So I studied human resources and business. I worked in HR for years. Had my kids, COVID happened, and I found myself absolutely burnt out. Just experiencing all the symptoms like fatigue, but insomnia, bloating, gut issues, hair loss. I started breaking out in eczema and psoriasis, which I'd never dealt with before. All the symptoms that generally get brushed off as hashtag mum life. um, which unfortunately at the time I did brush off and just keep powering through. But the universe had something else in store for me. I actually ended up getting a really bad virus, which till this day, I still don't 100% know what it was. It was absolutely bizarre. But I woke up one morning and I had a really high fever, body shakes, body chills, aches, and my mouth felt really funny. I went and looked in the mirror and my whole mouth had broken out in these blisters and ulcers. And I just couldn't understand what was going on. I ended up deteriorating. I couldn't have any food. And then within 48 hours, I couldn't drink water. So my husband Michael actually drove me to the hospital. I thought I would be there for a routine checkup, get some antibiotics or whatever it was they were going to prescribe me. But I actually ended up spending 5 days at the hospital. And while I was there, I had multiple tests done, saw several doctors, and not one person could actually tell me what was wrong with me. The only thing that they really said to me was that your inflammation markers are really high, but no one seemed concerned about it at all. Basically, they were just like, oh, this is normal and part of what happens when you have a virus, but we don't actually know what virus you have. So I ended up going home, and in the coming weeks, I did get better, but I then went on to develop an autoimmune condition, which is rheumatoid arthritis. In the gist of all of this, I basically had this major aha moment where I was like, for so long I had been putting my kids first and sacrificing my own health. And then when I spent 5 days in the hospital, I sort of realized why they tell you to put your oxygen mask on first. I had this moment where I was like, it all makes sense. And that's sort of what led me down the path of nutrition. I basically, at the age of 28, 29, got told that I needed to be on medication for life for my autoimmune condition. And I thought, absolutely not. That is not the way I want to live. So I delved into everything nutrition and anti inflammatory lifestyle. I ended up going to study, became a certified nutritionist. I learned the power of food. I learned how to heal my gut, my hormones. I reduced stress in my life. And before I knew it, I was literally living a completely different life. And I thought to myself, why do people not tell mums about this? Why do we not share this with mums? When we leave the hospital, everyone has this opinion on how to keep our baby alive, but no one tells us what we need to do to nourish our own health. Our bodies are so depleted. You add years of sleepless nights, eating kids' leftover scraps, and before we know it, we're dealing with burnout, which is actually a really serious disease. And no one tells us what to do. And I thought to myself, you know what? I think this is my calling. I think this is a bit of my mission, just to share what I can to help mums avoid getting to the point that I got to.
Yeah, I've got chills because I can completely relate. And
Yeah.
I agree with you wholeheartedly that, we do focus. I think you throw in one more thing, and that's working on top of that or trying to
Mm.
sustain a career. Um, but just mum life, just generally, even without the added burden of, needing to work on top of that as well,
Yeah.
it is a journey, and our instincts as mums, I feel, really they must compel us, because most mums do this. Like, they must compel us in some ways to put ourselves second,
Yeah.
look after
Yeah.
but I also think that times have changed so much that in the past the load was shared, wasn't it? With the
Yes.
time,
It took a village.
it really
And it
did.
really, yeah.
But families live together. It wasn't
Yeah.
like we can have a great village around us. I definitely didn't have that luxury. We'd moved from interstate. I didn't know a single soul when my kids were little.
Yeah. That's hard.
But I think that, I think that people lived, like, if you didn't live with your
Mm.
immediate family, they lived in the same street as you, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
mum grew up, for example, with, her auntie across the road, and, an
Yeah.
uncle three doors down. And she, told me that on weekends and school holidays, she would pack her bag and move to her auntie's house, because her auntie didn't have children and she loved children, but she
Yeah.
couldn't have children. So mum used to live with her, but that must have been a huge help to her
Makes
mum.
such a difference, such a difference. It is such a huge difference. I remember when my daughter was little and we had moved in next door to my parents just for a period of time until we were renovating our house. And I remember my mum used to work, so I didn't have much help, but I remember when she'd come home and it was that peak time where everything used to go crazy. Everyone was, it was witching hour. I had to get dinner done. And in the house that we lived in, everything was separate rooms. So if the kids went into it, they were still really little. So if they went into another room, I couldn't see them. So it was like this constant stopping and starting of dinner. And I remember just saying to my mum, can you just come over for like 10 minutes when you finish work before you go into your house? Just hold Maya for me while I just get dinner in the stove or in the oven. And that in itself made the biggest difference. Those 10 to 15 minutes that she used to just come and hold Maya or follow Bo around the house for a little bit. Just the mental and physical load that took off me was huge.
Yeah, it's interesting. And, your story is certainly not an isolated story. Like, in my
No,
years of practice, I know statistically that
yeah,
autoimmune disease in women is way, way higher in general than men.
yeah,
And I saw in my practice this classic story of burnout
mm,
with every single autoimmune case that I saw in
yeah.
the clinic. So, um, so I feel like your story is definitely, it's not an
No,
isolated.
definitely. Oh, whenever I share my story, it makes me actually really sad the amount of people that go, me too.
Yeah,
And I just think, if we can share our, I know you've had an experience with health as well.
yeah,
And I think if we can share that, and I just think these little things that we can change in the beginning when we first start to see those symptoms. If I had, listened to my body back then, I do believe I would have had a very different approach. And a part of me is grateful that I experienced what I did because it taught me so much. It's led me where I am today. And I know that I can support other people in that situation. But I do believe that it was avoidable if I had just known the simple ways to nourish my own health as a mama. It would have made such a big difference.
So tell me, what would you have done differently? Like, if you could, hop in a time machine and go back. And I'm with you. I feel like my own experience of, getting sick, mine was actually a virus as well. And
Yeah,
I started at that point of having a virus, and then ending up being diagnosed with Graves' disease soon
yeah,
after that. But yeah, if you had a crystal ball, and like you, it's shaped me. I'm not going to change that experience for
yeah.
anything, really. But if you had a time machine and you could go back and actually, change the course of your life, or
Mm.
just change things just about getting to that point, what would you do?
I think I would definitely start with just advocating for myself more and asking for help. I think that is a big one because at the end of the day, look, it's very different when you've got toddlers and babies and you're in that newborn phase versus, you've got school aged kids. Because my kids are still really little, they're 6 and 7. And I do work with a lot of mums more so in this stage of life or that have teenage kids, because I do understand that when you've got little kids, it can be really hard to, we need to acknowledge that it is really hard to sit down and make yourself a nourishing meal. It is, especially when you're in that newborn phase. But the one thing I would have done more of is definitely ask for more help, just advocate for myself, and also just sort of break my days up and find little things, small little things that I know are going to support my nervous system, that are going to help me have a better day. Not these extravagant big things, just little things, because I think there is so many little things that we can do that make a huge impact on our health. Simple things like going out and getting some sun on our skin. Most mums are simply so vitamin D deficient. And we know that vitamin D deficiency causes, a weakened immune system, insomnia, fatigue, mood swings, irritability, all these things that we brush off as hashtag mum life or people just expect to happen. These things can actually be really avoided when we focus on, the type of depletion that our body's going through, which something so simple like vitamin D goes a long way. Brain fog that gets brushed off as hashtag mum life, when a lot of the time it's actually an omega-3 deficiency that we can really support through, focusing on those types of things in our diet. So definitely small things that we can add into our day, like going outside, getting some sunlight, not starting the day with coffee and caffeine on an empty stomach, making sure that we're waking up in the morning and having a big glass of water, trying to have some form of protein, whether it's a quick smoothie, some toast with some eggs, and then having caffeine. Like all these little strategies that can play a huge part in the way we feel. I think I would have focused a lot more on stuff like that
I
when I
think
was
it's
in the trenches.
Yeah, and you possibly, I know one of the things that I've always suffered with is a bit of an all or nothing mentality. So I,
Yeah,
particularly around things like mindfulness and meditation and walking, like exercising, I, in the early days, definitely had an all or nothing approach. Like I would get up with good intentions of, say, doing some form of exercise, and something would inevitably get in the way of that, as it does when your kids are younger. And I would think, okay, well, that hour's gone now. There's no point.
yeah.
Whereas
Oh,
nowadays, if I can take 5 minutes and just boot around the block for 5 minutes, literally, and
oh,
breaking things down into smaller pieces has been a game changer for me, rather than it just being an all or nothing, even with diet,
yeah,
like rather than it being, I haven't, eaten well today, so I might as well just blow it all together. It's
yeah.
that all or nothing approach doesn't serve us, does it?
No, and I always say with exercise, especially, any amount of minutes is better than no minutes. There was a study done where I don't remember exactly what it's called, but basically they found that even just 10 minutes of walking a day can add a decade to your lifespan. And this is what it's so powerful. Even just taking that time to go, you know what, I'm going to do as much as I can for as long as I can. Even just that mentality really helps bring out those endorphins and feel good hormones in your body, because you've taken that intention to go, I'm going to nourish my body in any way, shape, or form that I can. And it's those small, consistent habits that make the biggest impact over time. So definitely getting out of that all or nothing mentality and doing what you can, especially with food. Something that I find and I tell a lot of my clients to do is, okay, rather than thinking about everything that you shouldn't eat, let's try and think about how we can add in more of the good stuff.
I,
Something that
I call that out, like crowding out. like
Yes.
crowding all the perhaps unhealthy food choices with healthier food choices.
Exactly. And something that I still live by and I do every single day is if I get to about like 3 o'clock and I feel like I haven't had enough fruit and vegetables, I'll make myself a super loaded smoothie and add as many fruits and vegetables in it that I can, as many superfoods that I can. I never think about it from a calorie perspective or a portion perspective. I always go in with how can I fit in more of the good stuff today? Have I had enough good stuff today? And that is just so powerful for your health.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's uh, let's talk about like time out just to breathe, just to be mindful. Is that something that you build into your programs and
Yeah.
recommendations with working with clients?
Oh gosh, yes. Because even as a nutritionist, and you would know this as a naturopath as well, food is powerful. But food, there is no diet, there is no nutrition that is going to outweigh an unhealthy mindset. And I always say to my clients, I can give you any meal plan under the sun, I can give you all the details on what to eat, but 80% of the work is your mindset. And it makes such a big impact on how your health journey goes. Because what I like to say is, the stories we carry, the negative thoughts we carry, all of this will determine the health we have in our life. And unless we can try and focus on nourishing our nervous system and nourishing our mindset, we're never going to be able to have consistent, healthy habits. Because when things get hard, when things get tough, it's our mindset that actually carries us through. It's not because, we've told ourselves that we're going to stick to this diet.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's actually a healthy mindset that's going to carry us through those times of resistance. So I'm a huge advocate of making sure that you pair nutrition with healthy mindset habits as well. Something that I do teach a lot of my clients to do is meditation. And I know that for some, this can feel like such a foreign thing. And a lot of mums might think, oh, well, in order to meditate, I've got to be in a quiet position with, a waterfall in the background and all this stuff, but it's so not true. I often meditate with my kids there, and it's amazing that they're able to see me do that as well. I don't know
That's
if I
great.
mentioned this in our podcast, but my daughter has this thing now where she makes fun of me meditating. And whenever I almost she knows she's about to get in trouble about something, she goes into this like meditative pose and makes fun of me because she knows I'll laugh. And the thing is, for me, is I'm actually so proud and glad of the fact that that's what she's imitating, because it might be funny to her now. It might seem crazy that mum does that now, but that's going to become normal to her later on in life. So I often do it when they're around and they see me. And it doesn't actually have to be for this long period of time. I often just get 5 to 10 minutes in. Sometimes I purposely get to school pickup. I get to the school pickup line early because I meditate in the car for 5 to 10 minutes before the craziness of the afternoon. And a lot of people also think with meditation that it needs to be where, you're sitting in this position and you've got no thoughts coming through. But I also like debunking this myth as well, because one of the most powerful ways to meditate is to actually sit in silence and let those thoughts come in. And what I teach my clients to do as well is I tell them to look at those thoughts as little bubbles that go over their head. So they acknowledge that thought, whether it's a stressful thought, whatever it is. And I tell them to picture themselves just sort of like brushing that thought away. And that's how you actually train your mind to not necessarily sit in a meditative state and have no thoughts, but you train your mind to have control over those thoughts. Because the problem that we tend to find is that most women are consumed by these thoughts and it overrides every single emotion in their body. But rather than not having those thoughts at all, the most powerful thing you can do is take control of those thoughts and choose when you are going to let them come in, choose when you're going to let them, make you feel overwhelmed or not. So meditation is a huge part of my life. And honestly, if having an autoimmune condition and an inflammatory disease, something that I say to a lot of people is I'm symptom free 100% because of the food choices I've made. But it wasn't until I combined the mindset piece of it and, my nervous system piece of it that I started to see real results with my health.
Exactly the
So,
same. Exactly the same.
yeah,
Every time I'm asked to talk about my autoimmune condition, yeah, obviously, I mean, I was already eating a pretty nutritious diet. So for me, the biggest piece of the puzzle was actually addressing my nervous system,
yeah,
making mindfulness a part of my daily life. And it's something that I have to say that I struggle with even to this day. I think
yeah,
I'm naturally someone who has a lot of energy, which is a blessing and a curse sometimes.
yeah,
Someone who doesn't need to rest a lot. But for me, the rest is the work. I really
yeah,
work hard at resting and kind of like I love that you are um, role modeling and practicing what you
yeah,
preach and role modeling what that looks like for your kids, because I actually have done the exact opposite in that probably a few years back, my daughter walked in one day and I was sitting on the couch and I was
yeah,
just on the couch, just having a moment. And she walked in and she stopped. She's like, "What's wrong?" And I said, "What do you mean, what's wrong? I'm just sitting on the couch." She goes, "But there must be something. Is there something wrong?" And I'm
yeah.
like, "There's nothing wrong." And I kind of had this moment where I went, "Oh my God, she thinks
She's
that
never seen you.
I've actually role modeled all of the wrong things to her, in that, for me, I'm always doing something. I'm
Yeah,
always doing something. I'm in the kitchen, I'm working, I'm doing the washing, I'm always doing something. And she has never seen me not doing something.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And, look, it is something we talk about. I know you mentioned fitting the mask first, something Jane and I talk about
mm,
a lot in this podcast, because we're mostly talking about children and children's health
yeah.
and well-being. But our kids' nervous systems regulate off our own. So it is super, super important that
Oh
we're
my
A,
gosh, yeah,
modeling the same things, but B, also when we feel good, usually we all know when we're in a flap and flustered and maybe you get a phone call and you're trying to sort something out and you're stressed, that's when
yeah.
you keep up, isn't it? I
Oh
know
my
mine,
gosh. My
you know.
daughter feeds
Yeah,
off that.
yeah,
I've noticed in the past.
yeah,
Yeah, she gets really funny when I'm in a stressful conversation, and I started noticing that really early on. It is, but oh, I always say the greatest gift that we can give our own kids is our own health and well-being. It really is just so powerful when we give our kids this energy of, positivity, happiness, healthiness. Like that's the most powerful gift that we can give them.
yeah.
I don't know if I mentioned this in our podcast, but my daughter went through a phase where she would get really upset with me when I was getting ready to go for my jogs. I love jogging, and she would see I'd start putting my shoes on, and she'd get like quite, overwhelmed by me leaving. And in the beginning, I used to feel really guilty, and I thought, oh my God, I'm abandoning her when she needs me when she needs me in this moment. Even though my husband was there, but as a mum, you feel like you're abandoning them when they need you most. And a couple of times I would not go. And then I reminded myself of just how important it is and for her to see me going, because it's what I want her to do in the future. I don't ever want her to neglect her own health and well-being. So it might sound selfish or guilty to some, but I would leave her at the door crying with my husband, knowing that she would be perfectly fine the moment I would leave. But I would leave her at the door crying, and I'd go for my jogs, because I remembered that that is the best gift that I can give her, because when I come back from that jog, I'm such a, I'm so much more of a present mama. I'm a happier mama. I'm more patient. I can give her this quality time with me because I've gone on this walk that's helped my own nervous system. That's, helped nourish my own health, which makes me a better version of me for her. So I can't advocate for that enough. We just have to sometimes put ourselves first, because when we put ourselves first, everyone around us wins.
Yes.
It's so, you bring this beautiful, radiant, positive, healthy energy back into your home and back into your kids. And there's only so long that you can fake this. And as mums, we are the biggest culprits of faking this happiness and, putting it on because we need our kids to see us this certain way. And I can tell you now that kids are so much more intuitive than you think.
They're so perceptive. There's no faking it with kids. They
No,
know.
no, they know, and they pick it up and they just know. So the best thing you can do is just, put yourself first every now and then, because it is the greatest gift that you can give them.
Yeah, 100%. I've loved talking to you because, as I said, my kids are older, so it's a lot easier for me to put myself first these days. But
Yeah,
I talk to a young mum who's living and breathing this way of life, and has like a realistic and these sustainable health habits in a very what is a very busy world
yeah,
is inspiring. So yeah, tell us
yeah.
about your. I know you run programs, so tell us about what you do.
Yeah, well, look, for me, I think I've gone through this journey as a nutritionist where I actually used to work in family health and wellness, and I used to help families, like, create these meals that will support their entire family. And it was great. And I loved doing that. But something that I did see, that a lot of mums that were coming to me were, and, this is inevitable, they were obsessed with their kids' health and well-being. And we will do that forever as mums, but it was always at the expense of their own health and well-being. And I started to see a lot of that. And I thought to myself, you know what? I just really want to help mums. And something that I learned over my years of nourishing my own health and healing my own body was I discovered the power of anti-inflammatory eating and lifestyle practices. That's really supported me in life. I saw a lot of mums, again, going into their health journey with this all or nothing approach, where they would go on a diet, they would start juice cleanses and detoxes and counting calories and punishing themselves at the gym. And then they would wonder why they felt worse than before they started. So one of my biggest missions is combining anti-inflammatory eating with this less restrictive approach to health and wellness, and focusing on nourishing, your depleted body and replenishing your hormones and gut health. And over the years, I've worked, with one-on-one clients and group programs. And recently, well, not recently, a year ago, I created a 7-day reset for mums. So mums that have no idea where to start or what to do, or how to nurture their health. And that is my 7-day Mama Health Reset, which is pretty much just a complete guide of anti-inflammatory eating and supporting your entire health from the inside out. So we've had over 400 mums do the reset and just achieve some incredible results in terms of just knowing where to start, which I think is always the hardest part.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much for chatting today. As I said, it's just so refreshing to talk to someone who has had a journey like all of us, and who's used that journey just to create positive change. And as I said, I love what you do. It does start with us ultimately as
Yeah.
mums. We do need to fit the mask first, and there are simple ways, and there's support like what you're offering to really support mums to find their way. So we'll
Yeah.
pop your details in the show notes, and
Sure.
if anyone's interested in connecting with Anna, then they can do that there.
Thanks, Georgia. I absolutely love chatting with you.
Yeah,
Spreading this message is so important that we do. And I just love what you guys do, and being able to, I remember finding your page, and I thought, oh my gosh, if only I had found this page when my kids were really little. Like, if only, you always have those moments where you find someone and you're like, I'm so glad that someone has acknowledged that this is hard and this is something that we need to talk about. And I
Yeah.
remember when I first found your page, I was like, this wonderful woman is just,
Uh,
doing so much for mums. So
oh,
thank you for having me.
thank you for for being here. We'll no doubt chat again soon.
Yes, definitely.